Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another video. Today, we're looking at yesterday's event. This was a huge wind damage threat, possibly Derecho, which I don't believe has been defined quite yet. But that was our main risk yesterday. I didn't have anything out about it because I was actually out storm chasing, but I didn't get anything good out of the system regarding what I saw in the storm chases. So we're gonna look into the environment of that system right now, and we'll see how that all played out and why everything happened. Right now, I'm going to be using this data here. I will use a little bit of a mixture of the Mesoanalysis archive. It's always a very useful page. I also like surf sounding, go back in time too. Very nice to look at. All these pages here are very useful like this. I'll be looking at that a little bit later. For now, I'll be looking at the model run data though. So here is our 12Z wrap for that day. 12Z wrap model. And our main feature was pretty nice high pressure ridge right here, and then kind of this broad low pressure troughing regime in the north, with kind of this belt of more extensive flow making its way into the region. You can see here, these are 50 plus knots of flow, down here 40s at least, and then it kind of drops off more to the south. Our risk area was right in this region. Here is our outlook actually, our 20Z outlook. At 12Z, you had this enhanced risk with a small 5%. Also, the wind damage was the main threat for all of this. There was significant hatch area for this system for basically the entire day leading up to it, but that would just continue to increase in intensity as the day went on. You can see here the enhanced risk gets a little bigger, including the 5% tornado risk gets a little larger. 1630, you actually increase that tornado risk into Michigan as well as increase that. I think the wind damage here got a little bit increased. Then at 20 is the outlook. We saw that moderate risk get issued with a 10% tornado region, 45% hatch area for damaging winds as well. That definitely came to fruition if you look at our storm reports here. Zoom in a little bit here. You can just see how many storm reports there were. Here's a map of all the other storm reports as well. See how extensively. Yeah, you can see how extensive all these storm reports were. Significant wind gusts out here in near Waterloo, so northeast Iowa. I believe there were some significant wind gusts almost out here near Fort Wayne, mistaken. But yeah, one all the way down here in Lafayette. So it's a very large area of extensive wind damage. This also was impacting highly populated regions, including Chicago, the Chicagoland region. I think we saw some tornadoes there as well. And these reports here, you already have 868 total reports, and this number has been increasing all day, especially that tornado reports number. Right now, that's definitely too low for what there was. There were so many rotations, there's bound to have been some more tornado damage. However, regarding the fact there was so much widespread wind damage, it's kind of hard to tell when it comes. You can even see here on the tornado warnings map, almost all of these were associated with last night's storms. And at a certain point out here in the Chicagoland and Northwest Indiana area, they just started making these huge kind of countywide warnings. You can kind of see this warning here in particular. This was where my town was under, and basically it was just a giant warning because the whole line was going on its way. They didn't know where those rotations would spin up. Fog was included. Basically, all of the risk area was at some point under a tornado warning, with a notable exception here in the kind of this central area, which is actually where I was on that. So regarding the model data, here's our 500 millibar map. Again, I talked about that jet streak that was moving its way through. There is also something to be said about the 700 millibar level. A slight shortwave is also making its way through here. If we zoom in, we might be able to see it a little better. Very vague. It's not very well defined. There's a little bit of enhanced flow here, and maybe a few little tiny kinks in the flow. Not super well defined, but they are there. And 50 millibars as well. We did have stronger flow going into this region, and especially in that overnight hours, you can see that increase was expected. And this is also the 12Z RAMs wrap model, so this would increase throughout the day. One of the more important things on this day was looking at the effectively and allowing models. So HRRR run was pretty important. This was the HRRR run that day. They had these storms forming right here about 4 or 5 p.m., which is exactly what happened. These first ones were more hail based, which again, as the outlines here suggested, that was the area of interest, the Iowa vicinity for hail. Definitely see that's where the most of the hail things came from. Here was a 2-inch diameter hail out here. Yeah, and that's where most of the hail started. And then as you went on, it was all wind. The original hailers that was forecast, and then as the day went on, these would stronger and more straight line. You can see that bow echo there. The name NST showed something very similar. All the models were very much agreeing towards this bow echo look. Question was how it would orient itself. So you can see the NAM has a much different look than the HRRR run. Fairly similar, but for tornadoes, what was more favorable would be storms moving directly west from west to east and having those outlines west to east as well. Because that meant A, that the winds were stronger along that line, outflow was going with the storms, and because you would have just better environments for tornadoes. They would be able to be more discreet in that nature. If these storms moving to the south, the tornadoes would not shape up to the photographs. Actually, we can look at photographs right now as well. Here is our 12Z look. One notable one was out here in lots of soundings out here. Here's a Davenport sounding for that morning. You can already see good amount of cape and a decent cap in place, but with the day heating up, that was bound to go away. Here's the Illinois sounding. I believe Springfield. I might be somewhere near Springfield, right near the center of the state. Same thing here. Again, that a little bit of a cap in the lower levels, but then after that, pretty steep lapse rates. The second sounding actually was one taken here at 19Z. This is right as storms are getting ready to initiate. They also took one apparently up here, and then now we're looking at. Here's a Davenport sounding from 17Z, and you can see that cap is just starting to break itself here. So cap's still in place at this point, but you can see that the cape is just floating at this point. And once that temperature kept going up a little bit more, that cap would be completely eroded, and you would get plenty of strong downdrafts. D cape here is at almost 1800 joules per kilogram, so extremely strong levels of downdraft cape with this system. We definitely saw that come out of the radar. I do have some radar data here as well. If I can make it work, we'll get earlier on in the day. Check 5:30. This should be, yeah, you can see the storm complex on its way. We'll watch the initiation in the beginning here. Let me add some more frames to that. 50 frames. We'll bump it up to 50 frames. See if we get far enough ahead of time. We'll start here at the, I believe this is, it's the radar here. Go back on it. Because you can see storms have already started firing at 4 p.m. A little bit earlier than was expected, I believe, on the HRRR. Also, props to this radar for updating only. That was very useful as well, how quickly these radars were updating. Right, here is back at 325. You can see those storms starting to form. Two initial supercells, as was expected. Those were more hailers. See that stronger cores and kind of showery activity ahead of that, and this would continue to keep on going and pretty ramping up very extremely fast. These ramped up very quickly, and you can see those little initial hailers. I believe some of these may have become tornado worn. I believe it might have been this one became tornado. As this went on, these were the initial supercells, but otherwise everything else was wind damage after this. I'm just kind of clicking through here for simplicity's sake. But you can see how quickly these just completely ramped up. Lots of embedded rotations here too. That's I believe the Cedar Rapids area off there. Cedar Rapids over here. I'm not too familiar with how Iowa looks right now, but lots of embedded little rotations all over the place. As you move forward in the day, so we go to 5:53. I'll go back in time so you can that moving radar as we go. These just begin to keep on building on themselves. This is also coincident with the cold front moving its way in. The surface map I forgot to look at as well. Looking at the surface, this was more of a convection kind of thing, right? You can see here's our cold front, and that's where these storms were forming. This is the rat model. So there's kind of that cold front. You can see that wind shift. These winds are more out of the northwest. Then here, much more out of the south, and much more out of the stronger out of the west as well. Here's kind of that cold front, and then in this vicinity, that's where storms are beginning to fire at that point. And then obviously, as they built on themselves, they would get stronger stuff. Here you can see that cold front, and then as these storms fire, they begin their own kind of boundary. And dew points also were extremely high this day. When I was out there, I have my handheld device. I got an 80-degree dew point as well. I believe miles started to show 80s as the day went on as well. Yeah, here's the rat model. We have 80s dew there. So dew points were extremely high as well, mostly because of how much corn there was out here. Corn supply is very important for storms because the corn just makes its own moisture. It's a plant. There's the moisture going up in the air, and all that moisture, because all these farmers basically helped with these storms making its way up in the atmosphere. Corn spot's a very real thing, especially into the kind of more late summer months, especially. Yeah, and you can see here the dew points are pretty high for this. I believe the line at this point is somewhere around here, but dew points were very high and very solid for this. I believe I was looking back at the radar. Let's go back to that as well before I get sidetracked. Yeah, you can see here the storms begin to start getting into this bow echo. Get forward another hour here. I have to kind of manually do this. Let's move to the Davenport radar as well. Just so I can still look closer to the storms. I believe at this point also these storms were beginning to get tornado warned out there. You can see also how quickly they began to speed up. A very large band, and then I believe as the outflow got stronger with these and they organized a little better, you can see in this leading edge very strong winds, especially right here. Very strong winds being seen by the Davenport radar. Possible embedded rotations all along this thing, and this will just begin to outflow dominant extremely quickly as was expected. And again, very strong winds. Here you're seeing 70 miles per hour plus, or 60 miles per hour plus, but a few 70s here as well. Up here, same thing, lots of 60s. I mean, lots of strong wind gusts going on. Not to mention embedded rotations. You can see a little rotation right in this vicinity. The obvious right there, green and the red right next to each other. Same thing here, possible rotations. And there are possible rotations all along the thing. Big reason why, if we look at the tornado warnings, I believe some of these are up here, why eventually they just started making these huge tornado warnings, how many bed rotations were possible. We'll check that out in particular pretty soon. Also, the reason why this storm reports, there's definitely not enough tornado reports at the moment, because there definitely were more tornadoes that were going with all of them. And looking back at the radar, again, it just keeps accelerating on its way to the east. I'll move forward another hour. Again, it's pretty straightforward after this. We'll do 2 hours. At this point, this should be way over central Illinois. These storms are very quick to move across the state. Same thing here. You can see how quick these winds were. 88 miles per hour winds. So very widespread as well. These weren't just winds right at the edge of this storm either. These were winds way in the middle of all that stuff. That was a big reason why we saw so much wind damage on this day. Let's check the loop one more time here again. We actually could go back to that, back to the lookout there we're just at. You can see this begins to accelerate. You get one leading edge here, and that's where we saw some tornado warnings. This area to the south, where my cursor currently is, I'll draw it in right here. That area was much less. I think there weren't severe warnings on that particular portion of it. You can see where you'd get that embedded rotations in there. Right, probably here was a nice spot for it too. Stuff was just spinning up all over the place here along this whole line. I think the Romeoville radar might be better for this now. See along this whole line. I mean, very strong winds again. Just such strong winds with this. This is an 85 miles per hour here, just kind of pummeling Sugar Grove. Also, possibly rotation in there too. Actually, I do believe there's a tornado report right in that vicinity, or at least a tornado warning. But there was tornado warnings all over the place. You can see again that northern regime that was much more north-south oriented and much, very very organized north-south. That was where you got more tornadoes out of, which is something to note with this system. This area here, that was more tornado warned than anything, and you can see here it was more favorable for those little couplets. In the south, though, these were more kind of south moving, so the winds were going out this way. That was the outflow. And the outflow here was going out that way. So you got more tornado opportunity up there to the north than you did to the central portions of the state. And then I'll go forward another 2 hours to update like that, like I want. Press play, the radar update real quick. You'll see just the same thing. These storms moving across the state. It's pretty straightforward for the most part. I believe there's a tornado out here in Joliet as well, which has not really been put in yet. But you can see how, again, just on the velocity side here, how strong all these were. I mean, at this point, we are getting pretty high in the atmosphere. Go back here when they're close to this radar, you're already getting huge gusts, upwards of 60s, 70s. These are pummeling lots of repopulated areas. Lots of trees down all over the place, especially in my town as well. Actually, in my town, one of the trees was completely uprooted, a giant tree uprooted. So, and this will move on to the east, but at this point, it would begin to weaken. You can see on the Actually, on this too, you got a few tornado reports, but for the most part, the most of the wind damage was in this area. A few areas out here, but most of it was right over here in this more splotchy but much more severe risk area that was shown here. Here's our outlook again. Much more wind damage in the Ash region. You can also check the SPC is nice farther. Man. The SPC has one thing you can verify the outlook as well. You can see that wind definitely did move further east than the outlook had shown, but the significant reports were very well in that 45% and those 30% right here near the Chicago region. That was a very good forecast for the SPC as well. Also, I want to say myself again, I was a big fan of the fact that they just tornado warned all of this in giant polygons. Essentially, what that did was gave people a lot of lead time. I mean, people here were had a tornado warning about 40 minutes ahead of the storms coming in. And while there weren't a bunch of tornadoes, like all across the line, they were all possible and could have happened. And if there had been a significant, would have known way ahead of time. That's definitely something I would like to give props to. I can check the. I want to check one more thing over here on the meso analysis page. That is, let's see, surface vorticity. I'm missing it right now. There it is. Recape and surface vorticity. Let's go back in time. For 12 hours, and we'll start at 16Z right as storms are firing. It's a very nice look as well to see why you saw more tornadoes in certain locations. See how high that 3 cape was, by the way. So those early storms that were they got more discreet and they were more tornado warned. You got that very high 3 cape, and that was a large region, probably why we saw all that hail too. So much strong instability with this system. Actually, I believe we had lots of widespread 6,000 plus cape. You can see on this rat model, this is 5,000 plus. The 18Z, I believe, was even more aggressive with it. There were some models that were just showing massive amounts of cape. Might have been the NAM. Oh yeah, the NAM was showing huge levels of cape here. Most unstable cape, I believe, even reaching the 6,000s out of this area too. Also, something to note: significant tornado parameter was much higher up in the Chicago region, and I do believe we saw much more rotations in that area as well. I'll check the meso analysis for that as well. You can see a little bit of surface vorticity in there. Again, for the most part, the storms themselves were what was forming all this. But 3 Cape was pretty prevalent for a lot of this. You see a notable um, miss in 3 Cape kind of for those storms in the middle of the state. We did see that kind of notable not much wind damage in this vicinity as well. Also something to note, you can look back on. Then you get that 3 Cape and surface vorticity increase into the overnight hours there. See right where my cursor is right there. That's where that surface vorticity kind of increased, right in the Chicagoland area, and that is when we saw those tornado warnings going. Then later on into the night as well. Actually, let me extend this. So you can see the overnight into the Michigan and Indiana area. You can see that the 3 cape would decrease. However, you would still get that surface vorticity, and that's probably why we saw those splotchy tornado reports. Like yeah, I think there are a few EF1s, but for the most part, we didn't see any significant tornadoes. But also, that was not shown by the SEC at the time. Last thing, I want to look at one more thing. Oh, actually, I haven't looked at the Derecho composite. We'll look at that as well. This isn't something I see on model runs very often, but Derecho composite, you can see it kind of exploded on the day. 19Z, I mean, you're hitting 14s, 16s there apparently too. Was it? 12, excuse me, 12. So very large Derecho composite, which I know. I didn't really know much about it as a mod. Oh yeah, significant tornado. That's what I want to look at. See that increase definitely right in the Chicagoland. So you start out with that, kind of that significant tornado parameter somewhat in place around the Davenport region. And as you go further on, you can see that at play. You can see that increase right over Chicago with a 5 right there, which again, I made a video very recently about one of these systems, and they said 1 to 2 is very high for the region. 5 is just extremely high. Really, in any situation, 5 is high, but that was very high for a very populated region. So, other than that, that's about it for this video. I don't have satellite data that I can find currently, so that might be on the weather.cod.edu satrad. They have a backwards track look at that sometimes, but currently I didn't worry about that. So yeah, so an interesting day. Definitely something that was somewhat unexpected. I didn't expect to see the moderate risk so quickly, but it come out. But very well done by the SPC and a very significant day. Something interesting to look back on. I don't know if it's been defined as derecho yet. It's possible. I tried taking measurements, but I don't think the path width is long enough. Or sorry, the path total is so. But we could see that upgrade and defined as derecho pretty soon. So with that, thank you for watching, and I will see